Hi, and welcome to this week's lecture, where I'm going to talk to you about lighting concepts for portraiture. I always believe that the key to understanding studio lighting is first to be conversant with natural light. That is, the ability to distinguish concepts around quality, strength, and direction. In addition, being able to see the difference between light and shade and how this produces modelling and mood in your subject matter is also critically important. Also, an understanding of how to use colour as an image design element or to produce an aesthetic such as we learnt with colour theory is quite necessary. And to date, both in lectures and tutorials, you've engaged with concepts of studio lighting such as light quality, and you've learned how to distinguish this quality by examining the penumbra, that is, the intersect between highlight and shadow. Through this process, you have learnt now how to have an understanding of the difference between hard and soft lighting. Remember that soft lighting produces large penumbra, the highlights are diffused, and there's a lower localized contrast. Hard lighting, though, produces a narrow penumbra, and the highlights will have a specular quality. Hard lighting also increases local contrast. So when you're photographing people, this is important to think about, whether you want to enhance or reduce skin texture. So in the first place, this can be done just through your light quality. You've also engaged with another key concept, which is lighting ratios, and that's the difference in strength between the main light and the fill light as measured in f-stops. All this technical knowledge is necessary to understand as it forms the basis for studio lighting. It provides you, the student, with the skills to create and apply artificial lighting to a range of genres. Creative studio lighting may seem quite complex at first. However, if you break the concepts down and think about them in a similar fashion to natural light, it becomes a little easier. So far you've used these skills to photograph food and product. Now it's time to move on to the genres of portraiture and then fashion. In today's lecture, I would like to introduce you to some concepts around portrait lighting patterns, as well as facial views and camera angles. This is very classic portraiture, but it will provide you with a good grounding, a place to start with your own work. In classic portraiture, lighting patterns are defined by the type of shadow produced from the main light. And today I'd like to introduce you to split lighting, loop lighting, butterfly lighting, Rembrandt lighting, then short and broad lighting and some facial views. With split lighting, it would have to be one of the simplest lighting patterns, and it's called split lighting as it splits a face in two parts, highlight and shadow. It's quite a masculine lighting pattern. However, you should think about what other type of subjects would suit this high contrast lighting. The images on this slide are much more contemporary than the last. However, they still are using the split lighting pattern. For this lighting, you'll only need one light for the subject, and a black reflector to absorb any light that may bounce off the reflective surfaces around in the studio. With the subject facing the camera, set one light to the side, 90 degrees to the subject, very slightly higher than eye level. Examine the penumbra. What type of light modifier do you think would be suitable for this type of image? Depending on what you have available, perhaps you'd be looking for a harder light source, maybe a small hard reflector and honeycomb insert. Also think about if you're only wanting to light the face, or do you also want to light a little bit more of the subject's body? So if you need a larger light source, then employing a gobo to limit the spread of light from that larger light modifier may be necessary. Working with the photo lights in the studio with the modelling lights on, it makes it really easy to see where the light is actually falling on the subject. So do be aware of spill light when you're working in this manner. I've included a basic lighting diagram for split lighting, but remember this doesn't include your background light if you choose to include one. Next lighting pattern I'd like to show you is loop lighting. So loop lighting is defined by a small loop shadow formed by the nose, so it's a shadow from the nose, on the cheek opposite the light position. Also check, because you should have catch lights visible in the subject's eyes. The shadows are slightly down facing, which gives you an indication of the direction of the light. Examining this image from Annie Leibowitz, you'll see that where the lights are positioned and also what light modifiers were used. So this is a big tip. If you're looking to reproduce or emulate a wonderful image that you've seen online or in a lovely book, then you can actually zoom into the image and look at the eyes, and you'll actually see what light modifier the photographer has used. With loop lighting, the light is now about 30 to 40 degrees offset to the subject and higher than eye level. The subject is full face to the camera in order for the loop to be visible. However, the addition of a fill light may now be required to provide further illumination of the face and soften the overall lighting pattern if you decide that's necessary. Examine the penumbra and decide which light modifier has been used in this image. In this further example of loop lighting from Annie Leibowitz, you can see now the small loop to the one side of the nose, as well as a defined shadow area under the mouth and chin. This is created by the single main light, and you can also see the catch lights in the subject eyes. Mapplethorpe has also used this lighting pattern. However, there appears to be a secondary light source, perhaps a large reflector used on the opposite side to the main light, just to fill out that shadow detail. I've included a lighting diagram for loop lighting for your reference. Once again though, no background light here is included, so that's a decision that you'll make as a photographer, whether you want the subject emerging from a darkened background or you want to add some background light as well. As with the other lighting patterns, butterfly lighting is identified by the shape of the shadow which forms and falls underneath the nose. It's also known as glamour or paramount lighting, due to its use in the 50s for Paramount Studios images of its movie stars. You'll be able to easily see in this Leibowitz image that there are secondary shadows in the eye sockets and under the chin. Butterfly lighting creates wonderful modelling on the face through the shadows formed under the cheekbones. In this example of paramount lighting or butterfly lighting, this time the photographer has used a soft or a diffused light source, and also used which was really popular back in the 50s, a soft focus filter. How do you know what type of light source has been used? It's about examining that penumbra. Do you see how the difference in the light source as well as the diffusion has actually changed the overall look of the image, but it's still the butterfly lighting? So how do you create this wonderful lighting pattern? Try this with one light only first on the subject. The key or the main light should be placed at the camera position and around 45-degree angle downwards towards the subject's face. You'll be able to see the shadows form under the nose, eyes and chin. With the model light on, you'll be able to clearly see this happening. You should also ensure that you can see those low catch lights in the eyes as well. Butterfly lighting is great for creating that modelling in and underneath the cheekbones, and also disguising heavy chins or heavy necks. It's really flattering for older subjects. So how do you achieve this butterfly lighting, and what type of light modifier do you think you might like to use? If you have access to a beauty dish, it's the best light modifier for this type of lighting pattern, because it creates this beautifully defined penumbra, which isn't quite as hard as a small hard reflector. So think about placing that beauty dish in front of the subject, so at at the camera position and then angle it down about 45 degrees. You will see the shadows form. If you decide that you want to fill the shadows a little bit, if it's just a little bit too hard, then you can add a softbox as a fill light from the same angle. But please just try with your beauty dish first, get the lighting pattern right, and then add other lights to it as well. If you have a look at these two images, so one's Annie Leibowiz's, one's of an unknown photographer, Marlene Dietrich. So the differences between these is, which type of light modifier has been used, but also, if you look at the Marlene Dietrich, it's got that soft focus filter on it, which you may choose to do in post-production. Next lighting pattern is Rembrandt lighting, and it's named after the lighting pattern or the type of portrait lighting created by Rembrandt himself. It can be identified by the small triangle of light enclosed by a shadow area from the side of the nose, the outer side of the cheek, and the upper side of the mouth, opposite the light source. There should also be a catch light in the eye on this same side, that is, the shadow side of the face. Looking at this Leibowitz image, you can see that the triangular highlight is in the shadow area, but doesn't break out of the shadow area. Can you also determine what light modifier may have been used in this image? With Rembrandt lighting, the main light is placed around 45 degrees angle from the subject and higher than the subject themselves, so higher than eye level. The light should skim across the face, creating this unique highlight and shadow combination. When you're using modelling light feature on the studio lights, you'll be able to see this light as it forms. And most importantly, there must be a catch light in both eyes, not just the eye closest to the light source. The lighting diagram provides some indication of the placement of the main light, but remember that it should not be at the same height as the subject, but above and angled down towards the face. The last portrait lighting style I'd like to introduce you to is flat or one-to-one lighting. So this portrait lighting style may be identified by its lack of shadow, unlike the other lighting patterns I've just shown you, which are defined by the shape and size of the shadow detail. Subject is lit by a large light source, and the highlights appear highly diffused. With flat lighting, the key or main light source faces directly into the subject from the camera position. Flat lighting is the least dramatic lighting pattern because it casts the least amount of shadows on the subject's face. Flat lighting can also be created by two large softboxes either side of the subject at the same angle, same distance, and also the output matched, so to create the same aperture reading. Please read each of these light sources separately, and then, with both light sources turned on, take a final reading back to the camera position to set the exposure, as there will be an overlap from each of the light sources on the subject. When placing your light source for flat lighting, ensure that it's in front of the subject at the same direction from where you'll be shooting. Angle the light so it lays flat on the face. It makes it very flattering light for portraits because it decreases wrinkles and any imperfections. And also when using flat light, remember to light from slightly above the subject's face. Lighting from below will create a unnatural and unflattering look. Flat lighting is commonly used for headshots and glamour or editorial shots because it is quite a flattering light. I'd like to talk to you now about facial views and camera angle. When we talk about facial views in portrait photography, the terms profile, three-quarter view and full face should become familiar. When teamed with either a high or low camera angle, you'll find that your portraiture will become more dynamic. It's important that you become aware of these different facial views and how they can change the overall character of your portrait. When the face is side-on to the camera position, the subject looking away from the camera as well, as in this Richard Avedon image, the subject is in profile. Just think about where the camera angle is set At the moment, the photographer is shooting just a little bit lower or just below eye level. Three-quarter view is when the subject has turned their face away from the camera position to this three-quarter view. Traditionally, when using this facial view, the nose should not dissect or intersect the cheek furthest away from the camera position. In this Mapplethorpe image, he has chosen to shoot from a higher than eye level position. Shooting higher than eye level is also quite flattering for larger subjects or people that you want to minimise neck or chin detail. This is also a three-quarter view, but the photographer is now shooting from equal or just below eye level. Notice though that the nose is still within the perimeter of the cheek furthest away from the camera. This Mapplethorpe image is a good example of full face facial view. As the description suggests, the face is full to the camera. So you should be able to see evenly both eyes and ears, if visible because of hair and such. Mapplethorpe in this self-portrait has the camera set to eye level. So the subject is looking directly to the camera lens. This is really quite a powerful way to capture a portrait because it makes the subject appear as if he's looking at the viewer. In this Avedon image though, it's still full face, but the hand is obscuring the view of the second ear. Avedon has shot this image from above eye level. So think about the difference between how the Mapplethorpe image looked, direct to the camera and at eye level, and just above eye level. So finally I'd like to introduce you to lighting styles of short and broad lighting. So the terminology short or broad lighting describes two lighting styles. These lighting styles are defined by where the main or key light falls on a subject. So short lighting is when the main or key light lights the face on the side further away from the camera, as in this Joseph Karsh image. This means, of course, that the fill light will fill the shadow areas closest to the camera, so your fill light will be at camera position. Short lighting can have the ability to make a round face look slimmer, because you're throwing that side of the face closest to the camera into shadow more. With the subject in this three-quarter facial view, the main light only impacts on that far side of the face, but there's a second light, a hair light or a separation light in this image, as well as a fill light to the front of the camera position. With broad lighting, the main or key light fills the side of the face towards the camera, so the strongest light is hitting the face closest to the camera. This means, of course, that the side of the face away from the camera falls into shadow. Broad lighting helps to make a thinner face appear more substantial or rounder. In this Annie Leibowitz image, Rembrandt lighting pattern is employed, but with a broad lighting style. Remember, when you're thinking about portrait lighting in the studio environment, you should consider the following concepts. What lighting pattern would best suit the subject if you were wanting to create a flattering portrait? Or what lighting pattern would best suit your intended result, or what you want for the overall image? Do you need to work with hard or soft light? And if so, once you've made that decision, what's the appropriate light modifier? Lighting ratios apply to portraiture as much as they do to any other genre of studio lighting. 1:1 lighting ratio will result in that flat lighting, while the other lighting patterns, the lighting ratio will determine the difference between the highlight and shadow values, as well as the overall aesthetic in the image. So looking at this Albert Watson image, which has that strong and hard lighting pattern applied, what do you think is the lighting ratio here? So your lighting ratio determines, remember, the difference between the highlight and shadow values, as well as the overall aesthetic of the image. So this Albert Watson image is incredibly moody because of the lighting as well. Then think about what is the appropriate camera angle for your subject. With larger people, once again, if you're wanting that more flattering portrait, a higher camera angle that is above eye level will result in an image which gives the illusion of slimming down the face. It also diminishes the under, chin and neck area. The subject or the face angle is also important to think about. Along with this, be aware of where the eyes are placed within the socket. You should try to centre them if possible. The subject's eyes do not always have to look back to the camera, but you should experiment with this as well. It's also important to think about how the final overall image will look. Do you want to include background lighting, or do you want to know that just that low-key lighting where there's a spot of light which illuminates the subject and they emerge from the darkness? With background light, it's important to think about how the final image will look. Do you want the background lighting to be brighter or darker than the light on the subject? The background light may provide some support for the overall composition. Examine the images in this lecture again, looking at how each photographer has used background light to enhance the overall feel of the photograph. So in these last few slides I've provided you with excerpts from the lighting ratio example as a refresh. Please take time to read through this again. Also, there's a cheat sheet which provides you with full, half and third stops on a table. This makes it just a little easier for you to work out your lighting ratios. So best of luck with your portrait lighting, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.